Now we're going to get started on the short block. So that'll be this video. Show you what we got here. Still got to wipe a few things down, but it's pretty well clean, ready to go. I'm going to start with the cam bearings, all that good stuff, and I'll probably drop the crank in a couple of times and double check clearances, things of that sort. So here we go. Starting with cam bearings, you guys can see that hole right there. It has to line up with an oil passage where you can see my finger in here. It has to line up just below this line where the block comes together. So what I do is I set it up where the split in my cam tool, I kind of line it up with a reference point on that. Then I can know exactly where that hole is going to be. If you don't line it up, you'll starve that entire cam and main bearing of oil, because that's the way it oils, is through that cam and main bearing. You just smack them in. It's got a piece on here, and I'll show you in a minute how it works. Yeah, that's lined up good. That's the biggest thing. Go slow, make sure everything's good. But yeah, we're good on that one. The hole's lined up.
Beat the devil out of it.
So the cam bearings I'm putting in here are an upgrade. This is the latest model LS cam bearing, and in the roughly mid 03 and later they'll fit in the block, but they're wider than the factory cam bearing. So being wider, they'll support more load, they'll have more oil on them. It's just a better setup. Okay. That one's in, at least, mostly. And what I'll do from there is I will get a pick and I'll make sure that that cam bearing is lined up where it needs to be by putting a pick in that oil hole. And you can feel it needs to go a little further. Okay, it needs to go in a little bit further because it's partially blocking that oil hole. There we go. That's good. And these are lint-free disposable shop towels. Just a little bit of kind of dust sitting in that passage. That's why I do this, and that's why I also like these, because they're white. Okay, that was number 5. Now we'll put in number 4. You just set the cam bearing down in there. These bearings also, they are specific where they go. Let's see if we can see this. This number, oh, come on, focus. Here we go, maybe. That number, 348, that's for the center. You have a 346 for the 2 outers, I believe. Now 346 here, 349 here, and a 348 in the center. It makes sense to whoever does these parts. So, and these bearings as well. Might see this. That's a coated bearing. I got a really good deal on them. It's not really necessary for a stock rebuild like this, but that coating really holds the oil and gives it an extra film to lubricate. And if it ever contacts it's kind of like a Teflon type coating. So if the cam ever contacts that bearing, which it shouldn't, and if it ever does, that coating will give it a little bit of extra protection. And there's all the cam bearings in. And that last tool I was using is a little bit different. That's a master bushing driver, and I do a fair amount of transmissions, so that's really what that's made for, but it'll do that as well. And then here's the cam bearing tool. It's made by Lyle, and it's nothing special. It's just a universal cam bearing tool, and it's got all these different sizes for the different size cam bearings depending on the engine. And that is it. And then if you got, say, an inline 6 or something like that that's really long, it's got an extension. Nice little tool. But there we go, and I was telling you how those things are coated. You may get a little ding in them like that, especially right there. Not a big deal, guys. And even on a non-coated cam bearing, you may get a little bit of, not really scratching, but just a tad bit of, I don't know what you'd call it, just something simple, a little ding on it. And don't worry about it, as long as you can't feel it with your hand or anything of that sort. Okay, here's the cam I'm putting in this thing. See if I can knock that around. It's a Summit 8712. I like the fact that they're made in the USA, and it is a 209 intake duration, 217 exhaust duration, which is fairly small, 500 lift on the intake and exhaust, and a 112-degree lobe separation angle. So it builds a lot of nice low-end torque. You can play with it and get it to idle just like stock. So here's what we're putting on now. Cam retainer plate, and it does have that O-ring gasket built into it. That will be an oil pressure loss if you don't get it on right. I never reuse these. The thing is just totally flat. After they get some miles on them, the heat just makes them totally flat and they'll lose oil pressure. One of the bolts fell down in my parts washer when I was cleaning it up. I'll go get it later, but not a big deal. This torques to 18 foot-pounds. Here's our main bearings, come in a package like that. So there are 5 main bearings. If you look here, this set of bearings has the oil passage hole in it. This set does not. If you get those backwards, you'll cook your engine as soon as you start it. This groove and oil passage feeds oil to the crankshaft, which oils the rods and the main bearings. And here we're going to be putting the bearings into the main caps, and LS's make life super easy. Number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and every one of them faces backwards like so, so that, sorry about that, this little dimple faces backwards, except the rear one, it faces forward. there is the crank and cam. And no, I did not use a torque wrench on those cam bolts. And after having those back off, factory torque spec, all that good stuff, I do not trust that anymore. So y'all can hate on me all you want, but I have yet to have one back off since.